It happened in South Africa and it's happening in China.
Global Vision presents the television news magazine of Southern Africa.
It doesn't exist on television, and it doesn't exist.
I would actually appeal to the world that information is there and can be found.
Because it is important that people know what is happening.
This week, South Africa Now features these stories. Inside South Africa, Soweto remembers June 16th. And in the U.S., demonstrations nationwide mobilize anti-apartheid sentiment.
We are marching to say that bullets may stop our bodies, but it cannot crumble the hopes we have for a new South Africa.
From Namibia, meet the Kuvut. The word means crowbar in English. They are known as South Africa's killer troops.
In one ambush, we killed 35.
When was that?
It was about 2 months ago.
And were you happy about that?
Of course we were.
And in our cultural segment, the sounds of South Africa, a musical troupe called Izulu. These stories and more this week on South Africa Now. First, the news with Mweli Mzizi and Carolyn Craven.
Dumelang. This week we remember the Soweto Uprising. Our coverage begins in South Africa, where June 16th has become a day of memorial and tribute. In the U.S., demonstrations and vigils also commemorated the 1976 student unrest. Mweli Mzizi reports.
The memorial began here in Soweto at the grave of Hector Peterson, whose tombstone had been smashed the day before. The 13-year-old was the first to die in the uprising, gunned down by a policeman's bullet.
When people talk about the harassment and the frustrations that they suffer in the hands of the system, that's what they mean. And you see today that an innocent 13-year-old child tombstone have been broken down just on the eve of his death.
And crowds gathered at Regina Mundi Church, the focal point for organizing in Soweto since the uprising. United Democratic Front leader Murphy Morobe was a student leader in 1976.
And little did we know that June 16th was in fact going to be written in the blood of many of our colleagues who were to fall on the day. And I think that when eventually the police appeared on the scene, where we tried to pull together influential students amongst us to make representations. But before that was to be fact, we already, in fact, had to start ducking and taking cover from the volley that was to come out of the police's guns. And it is in that skirmish that Hector Peterson became one of the first to actually to be fatally wounded on that day. And the rest that followed is actually history.
Meanwhile, it was difficult to tell Soweto from Washington, as thousands gathered in the nation's capital and marched to the White House to remember Soweto and to call on the President and Congress to step up pressure on the South African government to end apartheid.
I have no doubt that as we march today, we will march towards freedom. Yes, you will march with the children of Soweto. You will march with the memories of those children who stood so bravely to say no to the apartheid system 13 years ago. We are marching to say that bullets may stop our bodies, but it cannot crumble the hopes we have for a new South Africa.
Where do we want it?
This is Jay Weiss in New York. Demonstrators commemorated the Soweto Anniversary with a march from Republican Senator Alfonse D'Amato's Midtown office to the headquarters of Mobil Oil. Protesters demanded that Mobil, which announced it was leaving South Africa last month, negotiate the terms of the pullout with company workers. Inside Senator D'Amato's office, a group of anti-apartheid activists held a meeting with one of his staffers. They hoped to come away with a commitment from D'Amato to get behind a comprehensive sanctions bill now in Congress. Cameras were barred from the meeting. But as the meeting wore on, a standoff occurred, with the protesters demanding a guarantee that D'Amato would support the comprehensive sanctions bill. John Stilidese, executive assistant to D'Amato, explained the senator's position.
The senator is an ardent supporter of sanctions against South Africa, and his goal, along with that of many Americans, is to see the apartheid system in South Africa dismantled completely. Thank you.
The standoff continued, with demonstrators claiming the senator has had over 1 year to decide which way he would vote. Finally, the protesters were arrested.
We had been meeting with Senator D'Amato's aide and had requested a commitment for full support for comprehensive sanctions against South Africa. Despite our request, the senator has not taken any position in support of comprehensive sanctions, which is supported by all leaders in South Africa. We said that we would not leave the office until we got that commitment, and instead of doing what they should, which is to support those measures, they've called in the police to arrest us.
Despite the reaction from the senator's staff today to the protesters, they did offer another meeting in 2 weeks, this time with the senator present. From Midtown Manhattan, this is Jay Weiss for South Africa Now.
Last week, we reported charges that the Reverend Frank Chikane, a prominent anti-apartheid leader, was struck down by mysterious illness. Chikane, seen here visiting hunger strikers, nearly died while he was visiting his wife in Wisconsin. Chikane's doctor says there is now conclusive evidence that the substance responsible was a chemical called organophosphate anticholinesterase, which is found in pesticides and nerve gas. A byproduct of the chemical was present in tests of Chikane's urine, conducted at the University of Wisconsin Medical School. The FBI has been called in to investigate the source of the toxic chemical.
This is Joseph Diescho with Namibia Watch. Thousands of Namibian exiles returned home this week in the first wave of repatriations permitted under the United Nations Independence Plan. But problems remain, including the existence of Kufut, the feared counterinsurgency military unit that has now been integrated into the local police in violation of the UN plan. A year ago, a Norwegian television team profiled the South African-led Kufut troops operating in Namibia. They have shared their footage with us, as Stuart Sender explains.
The flag is South African. The commanders are white, the troops are black. Local fighters trained in counterinsurgency tactics, they are Kufut, it means crowbar in Afrikaans, seen here conducting military maneuvers in northern Namibia. Established by South Africa a decade ago to hunt, track, and kill guerrillas of the Namibian liberation movement SWAPO, they are a key component in South Africa's efforts to control Namibia. Here, a Kufut commando proudly displays a weapons cache he says was captured from SWAPO.
This is the ordinary RPG-7 with its projectile and charge here at the back. Effective up to 500 meters, penetrates the Casper to all our armed vehicles, armored vehicles, and quite an effective weapon.
Kufut has been accused of brutal attacks and intimidation on the civilian population as well. In the first weeks of April, it was members of Kufut who were responsible for killing the majority of more than 300 SWAPO fighters and an unknown number of civilians.
Even the South African authorities have admitted that Kufut have been rather rough and also killed civilians.
Yes, okay, but not in our duty. The murders that have been committed by our soldiers could have been by local population because they were off duty and they didn't work at the time. That was a personal affair they had with whoever they murdered.
But it is attacks on SWAPO fighters that this Kufut Sergeant Major is proudest of.
How many kills a year do you have?
I can say between 300 to 500 kills we have, killed and captured.
SWAPO guerrillas?
That's right.
Recently you set a new record. What was that?
It was 610. In one contact we had 35. In one ambush we killed 35.
When was that?
It was about 2 months ago.
And were you happy about that?
Of course we were.
Any celebrations going on here?
Yes.
Like what?
Well, in Oshakati we had a party. We had to celebrate that.
You're watching South Africa Now, the television news magazine that goes behind the headlines.
The Soweto student uprising of 1976 has its origins in the government's imposition of the teaching of the Afrikaans language in all of South Africa's classrooms. In the townships, the schools have remained centers of unrest and educational distress. This week, we offer the first of two background reports on an educational system considered to be in a permanent state of crisis.
A school day in Soweto, 1989. These young people have no school to attend. They've been expelled for being part of the student movement. In 1986, student activists marched in the streets and confronted police. Here, tear gas was lobbed into a school. Police with whips invaded the campus. Today, the schools are a battleground of a different kind. The hot war has become a cold war, as students and parents struggle with government authorities over control of the black education system of South Africa.
Our problem is we can't talk to the press. That is why I'm concerned. I'm concerned because if he sees photos of this school, they have their propaganda machineries, you see? They use it and then to their advantage. Now, if the truth comes forth, then you find yourself in trouble.
School principals like this one find themselves trapped, caught between the demands of the government bureaucracy and an increasingly alienated student body.
Do you feel very frustrated? Dejected.
Curtis Nkondo was a teacher for over 20 years in South Africa.
Because the blacks are not being prepared for academic knowledge, but they are prepared for manual work to provide manual labor, to work in the factories, to clean the windows, and so on and so on.
In this report, we will detail South Africa's crisis in education.
There are no doors, no windows, no ceilings, no electricity. There's nothing. And during winter time, these are youngsters. They get so much cold. So you have to take care of them.
In June 1989, the Weekly Mail sent one of its reporters undercover into a Soweto school. The assignment, document the conditions. Her story reveals a shocking scandal centering on the Department of Education, the DET, the government's education agency.
DET, which runs the schools, is throughout the country totally incompetent. It's so structurally inefficient that it gives kids the impression that education is unimportant.
Thandeka Gqubule spent 2 weeks passing as a student. One of her first questions, why were students not taking their mid-year exams?
Were totally incomplete. There would be a page 1, page 2, no page 3, a page 4, and a bit of page 5. If the paper was all there, you couldn't read it. It was so badly reproduced that students had to ask each other whether they could actually read the question papers.
Gqubule's investigation comes against a background of widespread chaos in the education system. Her findings show a wide disparity between separate but unequal schools, black and white. Black students must pay for their education. Whites go for free. Blacks must buy their books and uniforms. Whites do not. The government subsidy for blacks is 1/7 that of whites. While black schools are overcrowded, many white schools are closing due to under-enrollment.
The student-to-teacher ratio is enormous. How one teacher can teach 42 classes a week, periods a week, and teach those to classes of 60 to more students who are all restless because they can't sit properly, who are hungry, who just don't see the point of being there because the whole thing is so disorganized.
Teachers who support movements for change have it the hardest. Last year, 63 teachers were detained and many others were blacklisted, making it impossible to teach in the system. The state of emergency has clamped down on the state of education.
The DT regards teachers as part of their structure and there to enforce DT regulations.
Another issue: underqualified teachers hired by the DET. According to the Carnegie Corporation study, Uprooting Poverty, the South African Challenge, over 2/3 of all teachers in black schools did not graduate from high school.
The teachers too, when it's end of the month, they came here drunk, even the principal, all of them, from the first of every month till about the 10th. We are doing nothing, we are just loitering around here, they are drunk.
Since 1976, passing rates among black students have declined dramatically. In 1988, only 57% of black students passed their high school graduation exams. The government's response: deny readmission to students who fail their final exams.
DET doesn't come to the schools to check on the smooth running of schools as much as security police and SAP come every day to school. They don't care that it's chaotic and that there's no schooling going on. They just have come to check if there isn't any news of a riot or any possibility of a riot here.
In fact, some teachers hired by the DET aren't educators. They're trained policemen.
Those two teachers were two white policemen who were coming, and they were armed. For the first 4 days they were armed. And when we tried questioning him, what about those guns in your gun holsters next to you, he said, in order to protect us from troublemakers from outside. And we said, the troublemakers are not from outside. We are the ones who don't want the education system. It's not someone from outside who's telling us what to do. We are the ones in the school who don't want it. It means you're going to protect us from us. Is that the case?
And now, once again, as in the past, the army has occupied schools in Soweto and Cape Town. Curtis Nkondo recalls the tension.
Disobedient behavior was children going to the toilets or children going to the shops. Now, if they're required to remain at school, whether they're hungry or not, they have to remain there. And that is why at the beginning I said education is a means of control more than advancement.
Next week, we'll hear more about the responses to the educational crisis in South Africa. This is Litabele Masamola for South Africa Now.
You're watching South Africa Now. Coming up next, our culture segment, featuring the best music, film, drama, and artistic expression from Southern Africa.
South African music has developed a large following throughout the world. In New York, some South African musicians have teamed up with Americans in a dance and music troupe called Izulu.
South African music is an affirmation of life, an expression of a people's culture. Meet Bayeza, one of the groups that is part of the Izulu Dance Theatre, seen here in performance in Philadelphia. The voices build on each other. It's a crescendo of sound. For 23 years, director Welcome Msomi has produced and directed the Izulu Dance Theatre.
We've been working in this country from '79, trying to let people know about our music, letting people know about our dances and our story. And it's been a difficult and uphill struggle.
Thuli Dumakude, the lead vocalist of the group, left her career as a teacher in South Africa to become a performer.
The threats were getting to be mounting for me. I didn't want to find myself arrested because of what I was teaching the children. So I just had to drop out of teaching. But communication, I think I liked very much. That is why I chose theater and singing and dancing.
In New York Central Park, some members of Thokoza, Izulu's a cappella group, performed for South Africa Now.
Dana Dana. The people come together to celebrate. They give thanks to the Creator. Dana Dana is a song from the Shangaan people of South Africa.
Now we're putting politics together with people's culture. And the way we live, the way we look at life, the way we raise our children is a cultural thing, but it has been turned into a political thing as well.
It's a small contribution that we're making of teaching and educating, at the same time entertaining the American people. Our story is a story of a message.
Although the troupe sings in Dumakude and Msomi's mother tongue of Zulu, 4 members of the group are native New Yorkers.
My orientation in America, I was born in Harlem, is that of like a rejuvenation of culture. It allows me to play, to grow, to learn, and to celebrate who I am as an African born in America in struggle with my brother here.
I heard Thuli sing and I was intoxicated, and I kept saying, I would just love to work with her, would love to work with her. It was a cultural program. And yes, I am politically motivated by it. Music, culture, and politics, they all are linked together. There are a lot of African Americans who are not really totally involved in their culture. And I think that's why there's a lot of discrimination going on in America and also in South Africa, because they turn their back on their culture of their people and take on other cultures.
If you come from South Africa, there's no way you can divorce yourself from politics of South Africa, because you were born in that, under those conditions. So whatever is happening, you have to project or depict that reality of that situation. Izwe eletu, the country is ours. The Boers can beat us, the Boers can arrest us, but we'll never stop fighting for our freedom. We'll never stop fighting for our freedom. There's no way I can do a song or the music that says nothing about whatever is happening to the people of South Africa, whether it's the children protesting the education, whether it is the people saying that detentions must stop. The truth remains that the country is ours, and it will be ours, no matter what happens. And I do believe that.
Thank you for watching South Africa Now. We are happy to report that our program will be on more major PBS stations beginning in August. If you like what we are doing, please ask friends in other parts of the country to call their local stations and ask them to air our program. Write for a free resource list on the issues we cover, or to purchase a transcript of this program, send $3 and a self-addressed stamped envelope to South Africa Now, the Africa Fund, 198 Broadway, New York, New York, 10038. Please ask for show 307. South Africa Now is produced by Global Vision on a non-profit basis in association with the Africa Fund.